here is that dynamic walking foot. It's all pretty and shiny. Let me get closer. Let me turn a little more light on the subject here. It does say baby lock on it. It matches your machine. I'm all about stuff matching. Yes, that is part of my OCD. But if you see this lever right here, that is what comes over your needle clamp bar right there. And the easiest way to attach one is to insert it from the back of the machine. Okay? You want to make sure when you're lining it all up that needle bar clamp goes over the top. And if you angle the back of the foot up about 45 degrees, everything will just slide into place. Okay? There it is. The screwdriver I like to use is this one. This comes with your machine. Okay? And I'm going to tighten it up. Now it doesn't take as long as I'm taking now because I'm trying to not get my hands in front of the camera. So I'm doing my little contortionist thing, my little contortion screwdriving here. And you just want to snug it up so it doesn't wiggle or wobble. Oops. There we go. And I'll just give it one more little snug. And we're all attached. It's on the bar here. If this is not up there, it's not going to feed fabric, because what you have to realize with a walking foot, not only do you have your feed dogs that are built into the machine, a walking foot adds feed dogs to the top of your fabric as well. Now, it has these two plates that come with it, the standard and the open-toed. Okay, we're going to use the standard one first, and all I have to do is slide it underneath and then lift up on it so it snaps right into place. Let me put my arms out of the way as much as possible, and it just snapped right up into place. Okay, so, and I've got my machine threaded. Do I have it threaded? No, let me press the threading button. I have Madeira Aero Quilt thread in 40 weight, both in the upper threading and in the bobbin as well. What this is a 6.5 inch square quilt sandwich, which is what I like to demo on. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to just use a straight stitch. I'm going to use Q-01 in my menu right here. And I'm just going to put it on its standard settings, which is a 2 millimeter length. And everything here, if it's whenever any settings on your machine, regardless of which machine you are on, if they're in black, that is the default setting. Okay? And what we're going to do, we're just going to stitch down. I'm going to set my machine now. With a walking foot, you want to have if you can adjust the speed of your machine, low to medium. You don't want to run it full bore with a walking foot. It won't feed properly. But I'm going to set my machine speed in the middle section. I'm a little bit lower, and I'm going to press the start button. We're going to straight stitch down. Now, with the dynamic walking foot, you can also sew in reverse. Check it out. And when I say that, most of them will try to do that, but with a dynamic walking foot, it will actually sew perfectly in reverse without making any pleats or tucks on the back of your fabric. And I'll just cut that thread. And what you're about to see is one of the reasons to use a walking foot. So a walking foot is also not only good for a quilt sandwich, it's also good for any type of slippery fabric, be it vinyl or pleather or cork or velvet, silk, satin. You get the idea. Minky, polar fleece. If a fabric's going to shift as it's sewing, a walking foot will help negate that problem. So now I'm just going to sew down this way. And as you can see, I am not pushing it through or pulling it from the back. You want the machine to do all the work. And what happens when you have intersecting lines of stitching, there will be no types of pleats or tucks on the back of the fabric or on the front. So check out the front of it. And on the back, perfect stitching. This is just a piece of thread that I had laying underneath it. But here is where you want to look at, right here, when you're using a quilt sandwich. If you do this with a regular presser foot, there's a very high probability when it starts sewing this way, it's going to have a little fold right there over that previous line of stitching. A walking foot or a digital dual feed foot eliminates that problem. Now, with the dynamic foot, you have a lot of options for stitches with the dynamic foot. So notice here on this machine, there we go. This is in the quilting menu right here. If I go to menu number 1, and if I scroll up, I can select any of those stitches. So I can tell you with the dynamic walking foot, I'm going to plug it in. I'm not going to attach it, not the dynamic. With the digital dual feed foot, when it plugs into the back of your machine, which makes it computer controlled, and I'm going to go over this foot next week in detail, because there's some pretty cool tricks to that. When I plug that in, look what happened. Stitch 125, 26, 27, 28, and 29 just blanked out. And the reason is, with this foot, there's too much. It cannot sew in reverse as well, because there's a lot of reverse sewing with those stitches there. Check out menu number 3 with the digital dual feed foot plugged in. Wherever they're grayed out, you can't sew with them. Only 318 and 319 can be used with the digital dual feed in that menu. When I unplug it, watch the screen what happens. They all lit up. I can select any one of those now with the dynamic walking foot. That is the reason why, even if you have this one, you can still use that dynamic walking foot if you want to sew with decorative stitches. So, this is a hem stitch. I'm going to be in menu number 3. And there's its regular settings, but to really give it a good test, we're going to max out the stitch width to 7 millimeters. And I'm going to max out the length to 5 millimeters. And I'm going to press the start button and let it sew. Notice the backward and forward motion with this. That is why you cannot use that with the digital dual feed. This foot has better backward fabric feeding than even the digital dual feed foot. Now the standard walking foot, you can only go 3.5 millimeters in width on that one. And you totally cannot do any. The only stitches you can use with that standard walking foot is a straight stitch and a plain zigzag stitch. That's it. And we're almost to the end right there. I'm going to press my scissor button to stop it. And there we go. And raise that presser foot up. Check it out. Perfect hem stitches through 2 layers of cotton and 1 layer of quilt batting. And that's totally awesome. And that is the reason why, for this reason alone, this is why you could really utilize the dynamic walking foot even though you have the digital dual feed foot. Okay? So, another thing, and we're going to swap the plate out. I'm going to attach the open-toed plate. If you like to do applique, this is the one you would use for applique. We're going to applique a piece of fabric to this quilt, this little sample we're already started working on here. And I cut out with a pair of scissors a melon shape. And I'm just going to place this over here on the side of it, right in the middle. And without changing any settings except going, I'm going to go to the Q menu and Q14. And I am going to do, I like a 5mm width on my applique. I think it looks nice. And I'm going to leave it at 2.5. And now, with this open-toed foot, I can line up my needle right at the edge of my applique fabric. And notice, I haven't pinned or glued this applique. I'm just holding it down with my fingers. Gently. I'm going to slow up my speed a little bit, and I'm going to hit the start button, and we're going to applique this down. And what happens is, if you line up the fabric towards the inside edge, and what I'm talking about is the inside edge of this metal right here, that's right where your needle's going to drop, and you're going to get a perfect applique stitch. And you know, I love doing applique in the hoop. However, that being said, I love doing it this way as well. It just gives it to me, it gives it a completely different look. And then you can get a little more creative with some of the threads you use for the top stitching that you can't always get by with in an embroidery hoop. And I'm not pulling or pushing on it. I'm just guiding it, gently edging it over to follow that curve. When I get down to the end here, I'm going to stop it, and I want to make sure my needle stops in the right position, because then when I pivot, let me turn my pivoting on. I thought I had that on. When I pivot and lower my foot, I can look at it. And now I know I need to move my quilt sandwich over this way a little bit. So I'm going to raise my needle. And I'm going to bring my fabric over and line it up and hit the start button. And there we go. That's all there is to it. Can you go faster? Absolutely. I'll speed it up a little bit. But when I get to a curve where I want to start moving it around a curve, I want to slow it up a little bit then. Now I do not have my foot control attached to the machine, so that's why I'm able to use the start and stop button and all that fun stuff. Normally I would actually be doing this with my foot control. It's totally cool to do it with the buttons built into the front of the machine. And we're approaching the end of it. And I'm going to stop it here in just a second, right there. And now I'm just going to hold down the tie off button so the needle goes up and down a couple of times and press the scissor button. Okay. Now when I take that off, check out the beautiful applique stitch using that walking foot. And yes, you can do this with the digital dual feed foot as well. We'll see that next week. Pretty cool. But let's go back to menu number 3, because there is yet another stitch on here that the digital dual feed foot will not do, and that is the candle wicking stitch. And they call it hem stitching here, but that's basically candle wicking. What it also won't do, though, if we go to menu number 1, and that is the overcast stitches, which are these right here, 16, 17, 18, and 19. It will not do those. Or 23 or 24. The digital dual feed will not do those, but you can do them with the dynamic walking foot. For instance, if you don't have a serger, but you want to finish the edge of a seam, the fabric on a seam, this is how you would do it. 118 would be the perfect stitch. And I'm just going to leave it set at default, 5 millimeters in width, 2.5 in length, and press the start button. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. And I can tell you, I really like this foot. It's 50% quieter than the standard walking foot or the deluxe walking foot. And I'm going to sew it right up to that center line and then stop it. Right there. I'm going to tie it off and press cut. Okay. There it is. Perfect. You cannot do that with the other feet. Only this one. So there you go. So much fun to do with that foot. Love this foot. I can't recommend it more highly. And built into these, I like if I'm not piecing on my serger, I am piecing using the digital dual feed, or when this 1/4-inch piecing plate comes out for this, I will piece on this one as well. But for these 2 feet that are currently available for it, this metal edge right here, let me get this down here, right here, if you line your fabric up with that metal edge, that will give you a 1/4-inch seam each and every time you sew. Right there. I don't know if camera, there we go. Right there. Right there. Okay. So, let me go back over here to the computer and see if there's any questions to answer. Let me see here. Oh, absolutely. I agree with the CDO thingy. Marilyn, no, it's not. I don't feel it is better. And when I demo the digital dual feed next week, you're going to see why. Okay? So that's a little teaser. There's something that only the digital dual feed foot does. And I use it 90% of the time when I'm actually just sewing. Yes, it will absolutely work on the Altair, Lynn. It'll work on the Altair, the Crescendo, the Aria, the new Chorus, the new Ballad. Yes, it'll work any of the walking foot style of feet, the standard, the deluxe, or this new dynamic walking foot, they will all work on almost every baby lock machine. Okay. So Ernestine, on the Chorus and the Ballad, there are more stitches that will be able to be used with the new Slimline dual feed foot, and they will do a free firmware. There will be a free firmware upgrade coming out for our current machines that will allow those stitches to be used with it as well. And yes, Louise, there is a way to adjust with the dual feed, digital dual feed. There is an adjustment which I will cover next week. As part of my demo for that. Yes, absolutely. The approximate cost on this one, that would be up to your baby lock retailer. I honestly do not know what the MSRP is on it. Allison, the dynamic foot was released at Baby Lock Tech last year, so it is still a relatively new foot. What they are releasing this year for it is an accessory set for it that has a 1/4-inch piecing foot plate, stitch in the ditch plate, which is also good for edge joining, and it has a foot specific quilting guide bar for it as well. Hi, Trudy. Oh, wonderful, Jacqueline. Wonderful. Yes, Michelle, both of the plates that I demoed here come with it. Then there's 2 more that will be available at some point, I believe in September for it as well. So if you're wanting the new plates for it or that new 5x7 embroidery hoop, I highly recommend you call your Baby Lock retailer tomorrow or Monday and tell them that you want it so they can get it ordered in, and that way you'll be one of the very first people to get that. Any of the new stuff. I was told, however, that the new 5x7 magnetic embroidery hoop, there should be a pretty good supply of them for coming in September, so hopefully there won't be such a long wait like there was last year for new product. Okay, woohoo! And one more thing I want to demo, though. Yeah, I just saw it sitting over here. I have a little quilt started, and I am going to put on the standard. Let me swap my camera back. One more thing I'm going to do. Hold on. Let me get back over here. Yeah, right there. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to put the standard plate on it. And what I'm going to do, I have this little quilt started that I was using at Baby Lock Tech to teach on. And I'm going to show you how easy it is. And I will use the same quilt sandwich next week for the digital dual feed. Come here, you. I had that thread caught under there, and I did not want that. Okay. Okay, so we're going to snap that up in there. There we go. And I have this little quilt sandwich here. Check it out. It's all in batiks. I've had this piece for quite a number of years. I ran across it through one of my sample totes, so I pulled it out to use for demos for Baby Lock Tech. But if you'll notice, what I've been using is a feathering stitch to quilt with, and some of the others. I'm going to bring my camera over here so you can see some of the stitching that I've done on it. It's okay to use decorative stitches as a quilting stitch. Now, whether you're making a quilt or maybe you're quilting something to make a tote or a bag out of, totally cool way to do this. Now I'm going to... One I really like, though, is this one. Let me pull this out for just a second. Check out this stitch. I'm going to select this one. So what that is, it really looks nice stitched down. And the stitch that is, let's go over here to the quilting menu. And it is towards the bottom, I believe, number 27. And I'm going to make the fingers on that one 7 millimeters out. And I'm going to leave it, though, at the 2 millimeter length. And I'm just going to put down another line of quilting on it. And some of you have asked, what do I have? I make a lot of quilts, and you wanted to know what I do with them. Sometimes I do donate them. Sometimes I sell them. But more importantly, I have all of these quilts made for my trunk shows for when I travel. That's the biggest thing that I use my quilts for, quite honestly. So, what I've got selected here is this stitch, and it's called a hem stitching stitch. I think it's a beautiful quilting stitch. And all I'm going to do, now this would make it so much easier with the stitch and the ditch plate that they're releasing for this, but I'm just going to keep the seam line centered in between the opening of this foot. I'm going to set it up to about a medium speed. I'm going to hit the start button. Then I'm going to speed it up a little bit. But notice, now I don't have this basted except with a few safety pins, and I'm just going to guide it and let the machine and that dynamic foot ease all of that fabric through this machine. I'm just guiding with my hands. I'm not putting no pressure on it or anything like that. And I'll just stitch over a previous line. It's all good. When I taught classes out in Colorado, I had a bunch of little quilt tops like this made just to do demos on. And then they make wonderful table coverings. I like to decorate my house with small quilts on, as a not necessarily like a table runner, but just hanging on an end table or a table that has a lamp on it. All kinds of fun ways to utilize these wonderful little quilts we can make. Once I'm approaching where I'm going to stop, and I'm going to slow it up so I don't overshoot it. Oops, there we go. Right in that corner. Now I'm going to turn it and come back to the other corner of this little square. It helps to raise that presser foot if you're going to turn your quilt Sam. Okay, then I'm just going to lower it and press the start button. And I really like how this looks. It reminds me of some very vintage type of sewing I've seen on garments and on quilts. Of course, those were hand stitched, but this has a really cool hand look to it, in my opinion, that I really like. And it even looks better when you have like a 12 weight thread in this machine. And now, once I've got to where I want it, I'm just going to touch the little button with the circle on our machines. If you hold that down, that's to tie off a line of stitching. It'll just stitch in place where you stop the needle and hit the cut button. Okay. And then when I bring this out now, oops, come here you. Okay. Move this a little bit here so we can see it. And there it is. Now, I'll bring it closer. Let's see how that looks. On the back, I have black thread in my bobbin, which is okay, but it really gives a cool look to the back of your quilt as well. And you can just use multiple different stitches, different decorative stitches to quilt with, using the digital dual feed or one of the walking feet. Pretty cool. I love doing that. That's how I started with machine quilting, was using decorative stitches before I started doing any type of free motion on the machine.